What's up, everyone? My name is Blue, and we are back with some more malicious compliance stories. These people are just doing as they're told. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel. And with that, let's get into it. New HR manager pisses off hardworking employees. Mass malicious compliance. Years ago, I worked for an awesome company that understood workplace culture, and fun was a huge part in keeping employees happy and productive. In our office, people would often cycle to work and therefore needed to shower and get ready at work. That meant that sometimes they didn't get to their desk until after 9 a.m. However, nearly everyone worked back without being asked to deliver on deadlines. Management didn't care because they knew the work was being done and everyone always went over and above. Enter new HR manager. We had never really had one before, but were growing, so needed one. Within her first few weeks, she sent out an email saying that everyone needed to be seated and ready to go at 9 a.m. and that we needed to stop having social chats and getting ready at work. Or, if we did, do it earlier. She never acknowledged the fact that everyone put in unpaid overtime. Cue mass malicious compliance. Everyone would start at 9 a.m. as per the email and then leave at 5 p.m. Projects started running behind, and clients started getting pissed off because their product was not being delivered on time. New HR manager was confused as to why work was not being delivered on time anymore. People were starting on time. She made sure of it. Needless to say, upper management removed the rule and she quit shortly after. We all went back to our normal ways, and would you know it? Projects were back on track. Don't walk into a new company and try to change something that isn't broken. The people will revolt. Edit. This was my first post, and I didn't think anyone would see it. I want to clarify that OT was never expected or forced upon us, but due to awesome management, cool projects, and great perks, we didn't mind when we did do it. Edit. I see a lot of people confused about why HR would be involved with such matters. In smaller companies in Australia, HR oversees a lot more than the usual. It depends on the company, really, and this company was approximately 50 people. I feel like this HR manager would have done a lot better to just ask some people what was going on before throwing out this random rule. Like, if you see people doing a certain thing and a company's doing well, it probably works. Every staff member must have a name badge. I worked as a supervisor for a frontline staffing company for trade shows. We worked for dozens of them and would register people, print name badges, check people in, or sometimes just print tickets. Our staff was filled with retirees in their 70s and 80s, and a handful of young actors and actresses who needed a side gig. It was minimum wage, and as supervisor, I got $1 more per hour. Normally, we worked corporate shows, but the company decided to expand their services to include consumer shows. One particular event was not communicated to our staff in advance. It was a sex and porn trade show. Booths full of sex toys, porn, erotica. It was very salacious, and having made the trek out to the convention center, the older folk were embarrassed, but decided to stay because they worked the door and not the inside event. For some reason, the show manager, a coked-up control freak, insisted that each of them wear a name badge. I knew my staff would rather maintain their anonymity and requested that they remain discreet. We all had uniforms and were clearly employees. He insisted that every one of my staff had to have a name badge. Okay. Each of them will have a name badge. I began printing them off for them. 83-year-old Gladys became Jenna Jameson. 78-year-old Stanley became John Holmes. 86-year-old Edith was Tracy Lords. I decided to become Ron Jeremy. The old folks had no idea who any of these people were. They were just happy to not have their own names. Attendees loved the name badges. The show manager was so coked out, it never even registered for him. I really hope this led to an interaction that went something like, "Wow, Jenna Jameson? They have you working the door? Man, she looks a lot younger in the movies." You will work 9 to 5 so we can watch you. So, at my first job, I enjoyed the flexible work schedule, but because I was bored out of my mind, I would do non-work things during work, like everyone else in the department. I was singled out together with one other coworker and got told to work 9 to 5 instead of 8 to 4 as I did before, and boy, we did. We would show up at no later than 9 o'clock even if we got there early, and would drop whatever we were doing at 5 p.m. exactly. This included walking out of meetings and straight up missing them. We knew we were being watched for non-work activities, so whenever there was nothing to do, we started watching others for non-work activities, collecting evidence, and reporting them. Soon enough, it became obvious that they were targeting us because the others had friends in high places and didn't get in trouble for the same stuff. So we took it a step further and did exactly what our task described, but at a snail's pace so as to never not be working. They then threatened to fire us because our productivity was down and we were disrespectful, leaving meetings, snitching on people. We pointed them to the fact we were just doing as they said, and they struggled to dispute it. The 9 to 5 was lifted, though I'm pretty sure the watching wasn't. I then managed to make sure I was essential to keep things running smoothly in my team, and then quit with enough paid time off left to just peace out. It felt glorious. Edit. Since I've gotten a few comments, the reason I was doing non-work things was because I was bored out of my mind. I had asked multiple times for more work, suggested stuff to do, but got nothing. Also, I'm human. Nobody focuses for 8 hours, and I had many coworkers who did way less on a day. I was actually one of the people who focused the most, but had just not tried to be friends with people in high places. If you have someone doing non-work things at work, but they're your most productive employee, maybe use them as the example to get your other employees to be more productive? I don't know. I'm not a manager. I don't work here, lady, but yeah, I'll be your server. This happened to a friend of mine, who I shall call Steve, although that isn't his real name. Steve works in a hardware DIY store in a retail park, where there are loads of shops and restaurants surrounded by a large car park. He has a lunch break at about 1 p.m. every day for an hour, during which time he normally gets a sandwich or something quick, simple and cheap. On this particular day, back in 2017, he'd arranged to meet his girlfriend for lunch at one of the nearby restaurants, and had even ordered the meal in advance, so weekends they arrived, they'd be served pretty quickly. He'd been to the restaurant many times and knew the manager and waitstaff pretty well. Cast: Steve, Steve's girlfriend Sarah, not her real name, Karen, an entitled customer, and the waiting staff. Steve and Sarah had just finished their meal and paid the bill, and now Sarah had gone to the toilet, so Steve is just waiting for her. There are only a handful of customers at this time. Then Karen walks in with her kids. She spots an empty table next to Steve's table and notices that he is in a uniform. She sits down, gets her kids settled, while Steve is just staring out the window. "Break's over. Back to work then," she yaps, clapping her hands together to get his attention. Steve panics, suddenly thinking that he's been there too long and he's actually late. He checks his watch and realizes that it's only 1:30, and he still has 30 minutes. "Sorry," he says. "I've got a half hour left on my break But she cuts him off, saying with a raised voice, "Well, you can take my order and go back to your break. Hop to it," while aggressively swiping at him, but missing. It suddenly dawns on Steve that Karen thinks he works in the restaurant and starts to explain that he doesn't work there, getting as far as, "But I don't," before being cut off again. Karen shouts, "I don't care if you work on your break. I want my order now!" and fails again to swipe at him. Cue malicious compliance. Steve carries a notepad and pen with him as they occasionally help him in his job. He whips these out, stands up and says, "Yeah, sure, why not?" As he does this, he's gesturing to the waitstaff to not come to the table for a minute or two, and they are giggling as they've worked out what he's up to. Even the manager, who's heard Karen shouting, has cottoned on and is watching. Steve finishes taking the order and turns around, intending to go back to his break and sit down, just to piss Karen off. But he sees Sarah and instead walks towards her. She already has her bag and no jacket anyway, being as it is summer, and rather flamboyantly says, "Are you ready to go, darling?" and proceeds to walk straight out the restaurant, turning around to see Karen, still sat down, staring daggers at him, and tears off her order from his pad and throws it in the bin by the door. Unfortunately, that's where the story ends. So I don't know in detail how Karen reacted to that, but the waitstaff said she went to the bin to dig out her order, shouted profanities at everyone, and left without ordering. Has this Karen never been to a restaurant before? You wait for the waiter to come to you. He could have even worked there and it just not been his section. It's also illegal to work on a break in most places, so calm down. And that's all the time we have today for these malicious compliance stories. If you liked any of the stories, make sure to click that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future stories. Thanks for listening, everyone. Catch you later.